Yeah, that was the first time where I thought to myself, I broke down jumping puzzles into three primary challenges.
Huh.
Um, you can imagine them, on a scale of 1 to 10. So one is like the actual execution of a jump. So
Uh-huh.
you see that you have to jump from point A to point B. How difficult is it to
Right.
to time that? The second one is I can't remember what I called it, but it's essentially the ability to assess where you need to go,
Okay.
right? So that can
Okay.
be either more difficult or less difficult. A very straightforward example is when you're jumping from pillar to pillar, right?
Uh-huh.
Like on Griffin Rook Run. At
Yep.
first, it's just like, yeah, it's very clear. I'm going here.
Mm.
It's all about the execution. Um, what's the third element? Maybe time plays a part in it? I can't remember now. Anyway, let's just say there's only 2 then. I decided to turn the slider up to 10 on both of them and
Uh-huh.
say, what is it like? What is the experience like? And it's important to know, for people who don't know, I'm pretty average at video games.
Okay.
I do not excel at, like, Twitch games. Granted, I have beat all the Souls games,
Okay.
um, but a lot of that is just like sheer persistence and willpower. I've beat Tribulation Mode, um, but yeah. So when I build something that is like this abstract and difficult, I am suffering along in the process.
I see.
Granted, I generally know better, like where I'm supposed to go. Obviously, I'm the one who's building the
One would hope.
convoluted,
Yeah.
tortured path to get up there. But because it's so ambiguous, it's often hard for, like, I'll know the general direction I need to
Uh-huh.
go, but there's still often I'm like, oh, I'm a foot over from where I
Yeah.
should have landed and
Yeah, I
too
remember.
slopey there.
I remember
Yeah.
doing that. So I know exactly what you're talking about. And yeah, not just pulling off the jump, but not even knowing where to go.
Yeah. I'm a huge fan of spatial exploration. That is my primary um, pleasure in virtual environments and
Mhm.
games.
Mhm.
There are people who are explorer archetypes for systems. Like they
Okay.
get into the nitty gritty of like, okay, if I put 12 points into hammer and I have this, other attribute, how do they mix and whatnot?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
That stuff doesn't. I don't care about that at all.
Okay.
I'm all about like how can I get into that little corner? Can I actually jump from this point to that point?
Okay.
Uh, you know, so that's always been my thing, and I think it's just interesting from an artistic standpoint to see where the limits of that are. And
Uh-huh.
so I very purposely was just like, let's push it to the absolute limit and just see what kind of experience it is. Again, I hate when people suffer to do something that I made when they don't want to do it.
Uh-huh.
But within the context of Guild Wars 2, and given the how many jumping puzzles we had done up to that point,
Mhm.
I'm like, there should be a couple that are way out there on the bell curve. Like
Yeah.
80% of the jumping puzzles are around the middle of the bell curve.
Yeah.
Let's put some way out there.
Some variance. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I like that. That makes it feel more yeah, I think like I don't know, like as an outsider, I observed that trend in many games of designing for the middle of the bell curve. But the thing is, like, I think that as people, like humans, have an understanding of things that feel real versus things that don't feel real, and things that feel
Mhm.
too shaved down tend
Mhm.
to. I don't know. This is a weird idea that I'm working on with games where um we have an intrinsic understanding of the value of a game based on how well the game reflects other games and of course the biggest game of all, the world around us, and also the transferability of the skills that are rewarded within the game. And so like I see the desire to put something out there on the edges that's just really hard. It makes the whole game world to me feel more real and feel
Yeah.
like the things that I'm doing there are of higher value in general. Even if I'm not doing that jumping puzzle, the fact that I'm doing another one, knowing that there's one out there that's just like balls to the wall, I like that.
Yeah.
I think that's good shit. It's a was designed, it sounds like, intentionally to be the hardest jumping puzzle challenge at the time in the game. And I hear you talking a little bit about how um, it seems like it maybe is a little bit of a shame sometimes that people don't enjoy the content because they're not there. Like that's not what they've showed up for in terms of the overall world itself, but that's where the rewards incentivize them to go in some way. And I bet you working on an MMO, that's something that is something that comes up a lot. Is maybe
It
having
is,
the
yeah.
rewards be misaligned with
Mhm.
what the content's good for.
Yeah, there's this rule. I can't remember that there's a word for it or a short quippy phrase, but it boils down to the idea that if there is a slow, boring, safe way to do a thing and a fast, quick, skillful way to do a thing, 99% of people are going to do the slow, boring,
Uh huh.
awful thing,
Uh huh.
right? And that's just a reality we have to continually fight. And it constrains a lot of design decisions, a lot of things that could be more, and in my opinion, a lot more interesting, a lot more flavorful.
Uh huh.
But it has to be dialed in such a way that we're trying. And even so, you're going to. This is the fundamental problem of perverse incentives, and this is a
Mm.
problem across all culture in every system that humans have ever created. Is
Mm-hmm.
that there's always going to be ways to exploit a system in a way it wasn't intended to. It just kind of naturally evolved that way.
Mm-hmm.
There doesn't have to be a conspiracy or bad motives behind the scenes to create it. It
Right.
just kind of emerges, right? And that's one of the difficult things about working on in games in general is we're
Mm-hmm.
often accused of those things. Like some bad annoying thing is in the game. It must be because the developers were lazy or stupid or selfish or
Right.
greedy or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, and it's not that developers can't be any of those things.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that most of the time is not our it's not our motive. We're gamers and we want to make the most fun game. We want to play the game and have fun too.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's just an interesting thing that always develops. And so within the context of getting back to Chalice of Tears, like a big part, I think, of being a developer in the world, uh, a how would I put this? A potential power that we have is
Mm-hmm.
to communicate clearly. And so one of the things that I hoped to do, I had to fight to get the name Chalice of Tears. When I
Mm.
first was turning in my level and said this area, and, talking to the designer who was setting up the content for it,
Uh huh.
this area is called Chalice of Tears. They're like, haha, funny. No, but really, we're going to call it blah, 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 Caldera, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no, it is important to me. This is communicating something I want communicated,
Uh huh.
right? It's like it is the visual motif that I purposely designed because I decided that this would be, this outlier in this situation.
Uh huh.
Um, and I want players to understand going into it. Now, granted, it is a or completely a double entendre in that a lot of people will see it almost as trolling from the
Mm-hmm.
developer,
Mm-hmm.
like, haha, I'm drinking your tears, but
Yeah.
no, the point is that it is purposefully frustrating because I think, like you were saying, it provides that rough edge,
Mm-hmm.
that pointy bit in the game that provides more context for the rest of the game. And like you're saying, in an MMO, there's so many different facets to the game that are all run together in interesting ways and inform each other and stuff like that. And going with the theme of the release that we were doing,
Uh huh.
and like all of these things kind of led to that. It wasn't like an armchair thing or where I was like, I think randomly this is going to be the place for the hardest, ridiculous
Uh
puzzle,
huh.
but it felt appropriate aesthetically and thematically for the release that we were doing to
Mm-hmm.
have that there.
Right. I mean, it's a volcano. So when you're deciding, so when did you realize that this was going to be the outlier? Was that something you decided up front, collaboratively with the designer on the team, or is this like an idea you had that you then had to persuade people? How did that kind of persuasion process and collaboration look?
Yeah, the idea of having an outlier
Uh,
had been nascent in my mind for a long time. I mean, we'd been making content for Guild Wars 2 for many years at that point.
yeah.
Um, and I had pushed different, in different directions for different jumping puzzles for quite a while. And, I just thought at some point I want to experiment and see what it's like to
Mhm.
have, one that maxes out both of those. Again, there were three, but I can't remember what the third one
I'm
is.
sure it'll occur to you
Um,
as soon as we hang up the call.
yeah, naturally. Um, Yeah, so I basically I had it in my back pocket and I was waiting for the right opportunity. This
Uh-huh.
this content came out and it was all about this undiscovered island and it was supposed to feel dangerous and unexplored.
Uh-huh.
And so I'm always looking for like from a player experience in an MMO, first of all, you have this entire layer of expectations for rewards
Uh-huh.
and like what am I getting and how is this feeding my meta progression and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
So that's like almost always top of mind for most players.
Mhm.
And there's not much that or anything that I can do about that as an environment artist and designer.
Right.
But what I
Yeah.
can do is for those who are digging deeper under that is like, how can I thematically back up the narrative that we're trying to get across, the aesthetic that we're trying, and the total experience of it.
Mhm.
And so it just kind of naturally fit. I don't remember if I had to like fight with anyone to keep it as hard as it was. I do remember getting feedback about how hard it was.
Uh-huh.
Um, but also, I'm very senior on the team at this point. I've led several Living World releases.
Right.
People just kind of trust my instinct and roll with it.
Okay.
Um, and so, yeah, I mean, whether it was the right decision to trust my instinct and not not edit me more, that's
I
for
think it
the
was
player
great,
to
man.
decide.
No, I was miserable and I loved it.
Perfect.
Um,
That was what I was going for.
this begs another question in my mind.